Hello world, Nikolai here from Lantilab, and today is the time finally for dev blog number 11 or part 9 of Imbalance Factions development. So today we'll solely focus on ground units and the result of all the simulations and development I've been doing for the past month. So let's just jump right into it. First thing I want to tell you about is the storyline loop that I came up with in order to justify the relevant decisions in how each unit sort of fares against another. So I've laid out all 18 units that are from the base game, the official expansions, wider front lines, and imbalanced factions. So those are the 18 ground units here, all arranged in some sort of a loop. We're all familiar with rock, papers, scissors analogy. So this is like an extended version of it. And so let me tell you the story I came up with. So we have the Jedi here, which have been hunted down by the Purge Troopers and the Inquisitors. And once they get the job done, it's time for the rebels to sort of like rise up all across the galaxy with their local security forces, which sort of vastly outnumber the Purge Troopers. So the Empire is sort of forced to create the Stormtrooper Corps, which counters the local forces. They're better equipped and so on. Rebels, of course, go into the extreme with Saul Guerrera, doing hit and run tactics. And in turn, the Empire sort of amps up the equipment in terms of assault tanks and heavier vehicles to deal with these insurgents. And in turn, the rebels create more advanced and better equipped units. Specifically, they can target singular vehicles and so on. And the Empire responds by creating even more elite stormtrooper units called the Death Troopers. The rebels turned for help to the Wookiees on Kashyyyk, which are veterans, over 100 years battle experience and so on, but the rebellion on Kashyyyk is sort of like quashed using the juggernauts from the clone era. Rebels then turn to, people like Andor, seasoned veteran smugglers, assassins, and other sort of vigilantes to help them get the job done, sneak into either vehicles or facilities, and do what they have to do. To counter this, the Imperial forces sort of like create the scout troopers, which sort of thwart these plans, and sort of the rebels then switch to sort of mass producing like low cost utility vehicles to both help distribute supplies, weapons, and just to counter stray scout troopers sneaking around trying to guess what the rebels are up to. And in turn, the Empire sort of deploys then more advanced walkers specifically designed to counter any vehicle they meet on the battlefield. In turn, when the rebels establish a base, they have to sort of build fixed defenses like turrets to counter these walkers, and the Empire, of course, then deploys their heaviest walker of all, the AT-AT, able to bust through any sort of defenses. The rebels' ingenuity extends to the air speeder, which is like a civilian vehicle adopted. It's not meant to counter these, but they make do somehow with their tow cables. And finally, the Empire finalizes the plans for their Dark Troopers, which basically even airborne unit that can deploy anywhere, attack anybody, and they're like the ultimate in sort of the Stormtrooper progression. And we close the loop by having the Jedi reappear in low numbers, but they're able to completely dominate the Dark Troopers, and that's the loop is closed. Now, I've looked into some other relationship to make sure they are logical, but that's the green ones are the ones we're going to talk about today. So let's move on to the next slide. And in order for us to compare different units, we have to sort of give them like a common cost. So it's apple to oranges. And so light units will be 2, medium units will be 4, heavy units will be 8. So if you want to compare, let's say, light to heavy, you have to buy 4 of the light ones for 1 heavy unit. We have a second tier, the special units, which we are familiar with the heavy units. And then I have another tier here, elite units, which take 2 production slots to create. Okay, all with their relevant costs. Now, the main update in this dev blog is the battle engine. I've been developing this with AI for the past month. Essentially, it's a complex software to run the different simulations between the units, making sure that you roll the appropriate dice, then you take the appropriate value, you assign it to the best possible unit. If you have any special abilities, you take advantage to in the best possible way, and so on and so on. It's kind of complicated, and I've got it sorted out for the ground units, but I still need to do it for the air units, make sure it's working there too. It's really cool development, allows me to test like thousands of simulations for a specific battle, make sure that the units are balanced in a certain way, or as I call them, imbalanced. So the ways these simulations will run is I'm gonna get a report that looks very much like this. I have 6 scenarios, and they are then mirrored in the opposite direction. So the first scenario, A to D0, that means attacker has a leader with tactical value 2, and defender has a leader with tactical value 0, essentially no leader. And on the other extreme, we have A1, D3. That's basically the attacker has a reroll value of 1, and the defender has a reroll value of 3. Sort of like the maximum allowed in Rebellion. And so when we have a missing leader, we don't have any abilities, and so the middle scenario here will serve as our baseline where we can see how the units interact without either reroll or special abilities, and then see how the abilities change the picture to the left or to the right. Okay, and finally we do have one more aspect from Imbalanced Factions. If you're aware, I'm introducing like a new roll at the beginning of each round, where the 2 players roll dice equivalent to their tactical value, and whoever gets the higher number of successes, much like a mission attempt, gets to decide to be the defender. Of course, the defending player can defend by having equal number of successes, so the attacker must roll more successes than the defender for them to switch places, and this is done every round. Okay, first simulation, Purge Troopers, 2 of them versus 1 Jedi. That's the equivalence in cost, and we can see from the base scenario that the Purge Troopers vastly outdo the Jedi. This is basically because they roll 2 dice, a black and a red die. Remember, horizontal split means an and they have dual health, so they can be hit either by black or red, but the Jedi green doesn't really care what the color is, it's the same one, so they are perfectly sort of balanced to counter the Jedi. And the Jedi ability to flip an enemy green die doesn't really affect the Purge Troopers at all. And so in the baseline, they sort of compare really how it should be. And with the advanced abilities for the Purge Troopers, these are that they take 2 different hits. So let's say you take a red hit and a black hit, and you combine them to get a direct hit, so they can increase the number of direct hits and specifically target the Jedi. And with those, they're able to retain or even increase the difference between the 2. So overall, clear success here for the Purge Troopers in all scenarios. And so we move on to how the Rebels will handle them. Of course, as I mentioned, they have the regular Rebel Troopers. These are like local security forces, like the examples here from the guys from Alderaan, or space security forces there. And they're well equipped, they have decent training, they help each other, and so they have enough numbers to easily overwhelm the Purge Troopers, who, remember, they are like elite clones, so on top of the regular clone training, which takes years and years, they have additional training. And so once they are lost, they cannot really be replenished at all. And here the numbers are 3 to 2, and so just the rebel troopers just overwhelm the Purge troopers. Even though they're more advanced, they have more dice, they just cannot deal with the sheer numbers here. Okay, so coming up to probably the most important scenarios, stormtroopers versus rebel troopers in the base game. Essentially, they are the same. So 42 to 40, that's margin of error. With their abilities, so the stormtroopers roll one more die for every 2 units, whereas the rebel troopers get to flip one black, it's like a miss or a blank, to heal. Essentially, you take away the blank, and you return it back as a heal. And yeah, even with those abilities, the stormtroopers just have more firepower, as that's every time, whereas the rebel troopers have to rely only on defense when they can take advantage of this specific functionality or ability. And so overall, the stormtroopers sort of pull away in this comparison, and we get the proper results like we do, for example, in episode 4, the first scene, opening scene in the battle on the Corvette. Okay, so what do the rebels have in store to counter the stormtroopers? That's the rebel partisans led by Saw Gerrera. And these units, they just hide between buildings, they hit and run, and then they sneak into the population to avoid capture. So they're really difficult to target, and by that they're able to establish like local superiority. Their disadvantage, of course, is they are limited to a specific system. They cannot be moved around by the players, and they don't really care that much for the Rebel Alliance. They just have a vendetta against the Empire, just like in Rogue One. And so with these units, you can definitely ambush the stormtroopers and achieve victory over them. Alright, so the Empire now deploys the assault tank, which specific die color is made to target the rebel partisans, and their own health value is exactly the opposite of what the partisans can do. So they can retreat all they want, but the tanks will hunt them down. They even have an ability to flip an enemy black die for every 2 tanks, so that even more strongly counters the partisans from the base game scenario, with 74 to 22. It goes all the way up to 97 to 2. Okay, so what do the rebels have to counter the assault tanks? Of course, that's the Vanguard. They have a heavy weapon, which is now even more precise. Every Vanguard can flip one of the blank dice, increasing the chance from 2 in 6 to 4 in 6 to hit the assault tanks. And so these units are specifically made to target vehicles. This can only be like 3 of them at a time to make effective use, so the rebel player has to really decide where they employ these advanced troops with their advanced weapons against the Empire. Cannot be everywhere. So same for the Empire. They have an elite unit core called Death Troopers. These are really precise troops. They can modify their own die, either for health or for direct hit, and to basically adjust the battle to their favor. Extremely competent. They don't really need a leader to win a battle, and so they're able to overwhelm with superior targeting and efficiency, even though the rebel die is more dangerous. They have a health of 2, so they can withstand first hit and they can heal themselves. So an excellent unit. Again, limited availability, hard to produce, so the Empire has to make a choice where they do deploy these. So what do the rebels have to counter the Death Troopers? Of course, that's the Wookiees from Kashyyyk, specifically Wookiee veterans. They're able to roll a lot of dice. They can even choose what type of dice they have, and they have the ability of the Death Troopers, even a stronger one, since every unit can do that, not every 2 units as it's with the Death Troopers. That's of course because the Wookiees are veterans. They're hundreds of years old. They have battle experience, probably even from before the Clone Wars. and it's not a clear win for them. It's a fairly close fight, but overall they do score a bit more. So that's why I consider this a win for the Wookiees. And in general, the only option where the Death Troopers are superior is when the rebel player doesn't assign a leader to the battle. But in most cases, when there is a leader on the rebel side, they're able to secure a victory. Okay, so time to see what happened on Kashyyyk. So on Kashyyyk, the Empire deployed their juggernauts again from the Clone Wars. And these vehicles, they are just designed to run over enemy troops directly. That's evidenced by this black 2 damage direct. So the Wookiees cannot withstand that, and so they're essentially crushed. But it is actually a pretty close fight because there are 3 of them for every juggernaut. And even though they are targeting them so precisely, the Wookiees are able to adjust their die to make sure they heal properly. And it's essentially a tight battle. However, the juggernauts have an extra ability to scramble units. And so even without that, it's a tight fight. If they're able to deploy 2 additional troops, like assault tanks or something else that's even they can deploy 1 Death Trooper, then it's not going to be that close of a fight. And the Empire will come out on top easily. And so the Rebel counter to the Juggernaut will be the Rebel Pathfinder. It's like the guys from Rogue One. When they rescued Jyn Erso, exactly the scenario. They somehow stopped the whole Juggernaut in order to facilitate this rescue mission. Pathfinders are a really versatile unit. They're hard to hit, and they're able to take advantage of black heal as 2 black hits if needed. So they can make the line from Rogue One, make 1 man count as 100. 10 men count as 100. The only disadvantage, of course, is they take 2 production slots. So the Rebel player really has to choose where they deploy these. They're not really that expendable. And so they have to be reserved for critical missions that achieve point score on the board somehow. I haven't accounted here for the scramble ability, but that usually is because when you are attacking, you can choose to attack when the other player doesn't have units on the build queue that they can scramble in. So the scramble ability, as you know, takes units from the build queue into the active theater of combat. If you don't have units there, you cannot scramble anything. Alright, so Pathfinders. What do the Empire has to counter them? That will be the Scout Troopers, really easy counter, so they are specifically designed to target the green health of the Pathfinders. They are low cost, and they can deploy even more units if they spot a Pathfinder, even in the same round. So that's a perfect clean counter, just cheaper, specifically designed to target them, and this is showing in the results. What do the rebels have to counter the Scout Troopers? And this is like an asymmetric counter. The speeder trucks are a very cool unit. It's not like a combat winning unit, but it's a combat like a support unit, and their main sort of strength is in being able to generate support from the local population in the form of recruit units that can be then changed into all types of rebel light ground units like troopers, partisans, vanguards, and so on. And so if you leave them alone, for every production slot they can generate 2 speeder trucks, and they can then multiply to have a lot of recruits on the ground, sort of countering the Imperial advantage in production overall. And when faced one-on-one, or in this case 2-4 on the ground, this actually should be 2-2, not 2-4, but 2-2, it's still a win for the speeder trucks, as they have a black die, and the green die have a lot less chance to win against the speeder trucks, and it says here Scout Trooper ×2 versus speeder truck ×2. So I just need to correct this symbol, but otherwise the result is correct, 43% lead. Okay, now once we have speeder trucks on the battlefield, the Empire gets to deploy the ATSTs. They are more expensive, heavily armed unit. They can roll 2 different dice, not one or the other. So again, vertical split, it's an or, horizontal split, it's an and they have the special ability, really cool ability, where you can swap the results of 2 colors. So let's say you have a blank black and a blank or a sort of a red hit. You can swap them to get a black hit and a red blank or some other combination, which will be more useful in the moment. And so especially with higher numbers, minimum 2 ATSTs are needed to activate this ability. They can overwhelm with firepower and precision and more efficiency in the die rolling. And so once the rebels establish their base, they have to start putting fixed defenses like the Golem arms turret to counter the scouting ATSTs, and they really efficiently handle them, especially in low numbers, because the green dice are limited to 3. So in very large numbers, actually the AT-ATs get to claw up or even overwhelm them, but in the numbers that really matter in the game, the Golem arms turret can stand on its own and counter them. Of course, to break the defenses of the Rebel Alliance, the Empire will deploy the AT-AT, and in the imbalanced faction versions, the AT-AT gets to have an ability to do 2 red damage to a building. Exactly the kind of structure that the Golem's turret is, and so essentially they're breaking fortifications with this ability in addition to their other dice. They even have the ability to deploy or sort of scramble a trooper, but in the scenario where you place 1 AT-AT versus 2 Golem arms turrets, it's actually a draw, because they have really good dice in these low numbers. But when you go to higher numbers, the Imperial side can just roll more dice, and so they're able to overwhelm the 4 turrets, which just cannot roll more than 3 dice at a time. Okay, so what do we have to counter the AT-ATs? And that's one of the most famous battles from the Battle of Hoth. We have the Air Speeder, and that's a really cool, unique ability I have for the Air Speeder. I came up with this very recently. And so the default ability is you roll a black and a red die. But if you have tactical skill, like if you have a leader, they can activate one of the Air Speeders to roll 3 green dice instead of 1 black and 1 red. And so this mimics the alternative weapon system, which is represented by the tow cable on the back, and those units rolling these dice cannot really heal them. They have to have other units sort of like circling around, protecting them. So it's really thematic having this ability, and if they have the proper luck and proper reroll, they can roll the necessary 3 hits to take down a full AT-AT. And so in low numbers, that strategy really pays off, and the airspeeders can get an advantage over the AT-ATs. But in higher numbers, the situation is much more closer, and it's more challenging for the airspeeders to win this fight. So it's kind of thematic as well. And the final one, of the second final link in the chain, is we have the Death Troopers enter the scene. These are really advanced units, really hard to destroy. They don't really shine with any precision, but they can overwhelm. They can deploy from orbit, land directly on top of your vehicle or building. They can punch through walls, and so I have created a very unique ability for the Death Troopers. Essentially, you get to choose whether to use them in space or ground. And so if you do the regular thing and place your cube here the tactical cube, you get to roll the green dice as normal, but you also get 1 direct damage to a building. And actually I've removed this, so you can now even damage things like the airspeeder. And the alternative is if you put it on the left side, then this unit essentially gets to deal damage to a red health ship. So all the cruisers the rebels have, these units can infiltrate them, and they're really hard to target in space because they have 2 green values, so it's like an advanced fighter. And yeah, I think it's very thematic. You can actually recreate one of the first battles with Admiral Throne using this specific unit when they attack the shipyard, and they can essentially damage a lot of the rebel cruisers. So very cool. And overall, in this engagement 4 versus 3, the Death Troopers really stand on top, especially because of this direct damage to a red health unit. And finally, the link that closes the chain that we started with is the engagement of 2 Death Troopers versus the Jedi. Here, all the Jedi abilities come into the effect. They can nullify any damage that the Death Troopers do, and they can heal on the same or next turn with their own die. So always either pairing or just returning back the damage directly. And the special abilities of the Death Trooper really don't touch the Jedi, where in turn its own abilities is sort of helps its own survival, and so the Jedi come clear on top. And in the scenario where you have a leader, they're basically 100-0. So really thematic. Again, you can recreate the battle from Season 2, Episode 8 on The Mandalorian with those 2 units now. Okay, so we've completed the full rock, paper, scissors loop. If you want to make sure the algorithm sort of recommends this video to somebody else who plays Rebellion, just give it a like. You don't need to share it or anything, just a like is enough to influence the algorithm. And I wanted to show you that there's actually, because it's 18 units, so that's 9 on each side, there's a total of 81 combinations of units. You can test any 2 combination, even units between the same faction. But I'm going to look into another scenario that's very sort of enigmatic, but never happened. Airspeeders versus ATST. So take a moment to guess who's going to win. And I'm going to go through the different scenarios. Because they are equivalent in cost, we can test them all the way from 1-1 to 5-5. And so in 1-1, because of the unique tow cable thing here that they can directly pick up 3 green dice, the airspeeders clearly can overwhelm a single ATST with firepower, and the ATST cannot activate its own special ability in these numbers. In higher numbers, it's essentially even. 2 versus 2. You can see 44 versus 37 when both of them have 1 unit, 1 leader into them, and the increase starting to pile up in the ATST's favor because of their, it's like a squadron ability to coordinate. They of course are more advanced military unit. Their cockpit can rotate 360 degrees to provide fire in all directions, whereas the airspeed are really limited in only forward firepower. And they are a civilian vehicle after all. They cannot sustain high fire rate. In 4 versus 4, it's even more stand out. So up to 18% overall advantage. And in 5 versus 5, it's all the way up to 21. Okay, so let's see. I wanted to just explain a bit more about the different abilities in terms of visual consistency. I've now sort of came to a very specific look which helps identify the different abilities in the battle step order. So we have the battle step order here, where you choose a tactic card, you then resolve the main ability, you roll your dice, you re-roll all the dice with your leader, you then resolve some remaining tactical card abilities, like for example blocking specific hits or direct hits. You then remove damage from your units using the heal symbol. You assign your hits and direct hits, and then destroy units. So this is the standard battle sequence for both Imbalanced Factions and Rise of the Empire. I've been able to standardize that. And so within that, let's start with the resolve. So here we have the Death Star under construction can now fire its super laser even before it's completed, and it does 3 damage to one capital ship or a structure in this unit system. And that specific ability, you can do it directly in the resolve step as indicated by the italic font here. A roll, basically all your dice from the different units get to be rolled in this step. The action step is probably the one that's going to be mostly used, and any action ability will of course have the action word written in front of it. And remove, same thing, we'll have the remove word written in front of it. So the ion cannon here has a unique ability to move 2 triangular ships from this unit's location to the build queue, and that essentially sort of simulates the ion cannon providing a pathway for 2 units to escape to be used somewhere else, the evacuation route. So yeah, that's why it's in the remove section. And then for the assign, we have this Rebel Pathfinder as an example. Treat 1 Rebel black heal as 2 black hits. So essentially you're just taking whatever you have and then you're applying it directly according to if you have this unit activated. And all these abilities which are in this battle step sequence, they have something in common. They are surrounded by either blue or orange like border, signifying its need to have a leader to activate this ability and that it's a battle ability. So all the battle abilities will have this border. Now, that's the first type of ability, the battle ability. Command abilities are those which do not have that border. They may have just like a darker or lighter border, but not a color one. So an example here is the Light Freighter, and on the other side we have the Interdictor Cruiser, has sort of like a non-battle ability. I consider things that happen at the start of battle or combat and at the end, like the retreat step, to be non-battle abilities. They don't directly influence the combat itself. They happen at the beginning or at the end, and they do not require leader to activate them. They're sort of like a built-in abilities. And so command abilities which relate to movement have a little bit different background, matching the background of the unit icon here to make sure that they're visually distinct and you can easily pick them out from those like pre and post combat abilities, which can be either in dark or in light color depending on if they influence the rebels or the empire. So, and there's one more type of ability here as represented by the shield bunker, the second part. It's a raised section, so it signifies it's a combat thing, and it just points to something that you have to have in mind when doing combat with the shield bunker. Of course, it protects any Death Stars in this unit system. Okay, and final ability is the refresh abilities. They do not have a raised section, they're just like dented inwards, so represented here by the speed truck. They happen in the refresh phase, so deploying units, here example, and then we have the shield bunker again, an example for such a refresh kind of ability, so you can easily tell them apart. So that's the visual style I've established for all the different abilities. And yeah, let's move on to any match requests. I figure out people wonder what will happen between such and such unit, and so I've placed the cost, like a production cost, on each one of them, so you can easily match them. Just make sure that when you're matching 2 units, they have to come up to the same cost. So if you want to, let's say, do a battle between air speeders and stormtroopers should actually be 2, not 3. My mistake. The rebel partisans should be 3, and the stormtroopers should be 2. So let's imagine the stormtroopers are 2. You just need 2 of them versus every airspeeder. So a good battle will probably be 2 airspeeders versus 4 stormtroopers, coming up to a total of 8 cost. Okay. All right, so if you have any such requests, just post them in the comments of the video. And that should do it all for today. I hope you enjoyed this update. I'll be moving on now to the space units. Make sure that there is a good balance there, a good story to tell, and everything matches the lore as much as possible. And thanks so much for staying with me until the end, and enjoy your day.